Aldred stood before the roaring crowd, their cheers echoing through the grand hall, each shout reverberating like a thunderous anthem. Glory to Avalonia! Glory to the Dragon Slayer! The people's faces were alight with admiration, their eyes wide with wonder as they beheld their hero, Aldred, the fabled leader of Black Silver, the adventuring party renowned across the kingdom. Yet, beneath the applause and the accolades, Aldred felt an emptiness gnawing at him, a hollow echo that no amount of glory could fill. He had reached the peak of his journey, or so it seemed. The fame, the power, the title of Dragon Slayer, all of it weighed heavily on his soul. As he looked out into the sea of faces, he could not help but wonder how he had ended up here. Was this truly his destiny, or merely the consequence of choices made in desperation? His mind wandered back to a time long past, a time when he was but a nameless orphan, scrabbling for scraps just to survive. Those were days of hunger and fear, days when the sword was not a symbol of heroism, but a means to ward off starvation. Killing monsters was not about valor or glory. It was about survival, plain and simple. Even now, as the people chanted his name, Aldred could feel the weight of those old days bearing down on him. He could almost smell the stench of the alleyways he once called home, the cold stone pressing against his back as he hid from danger. Back then, strength meant safety. The weak were devoured, and only the strong could protect themselves. It was this brutal truth that had shaped him into the warrior he was today. We are greeted with a flashback of a rank adventurer, Aldred, being praised, celebrated, and extolled to the high heavens by the clamoring public for his latest feat as the leader of the adventuring party, Black Silver. Aldred reminisces about his humble beginnings when he was nothing more than an ordinary orphan who worked tirelessly for measly rewards just to feed himself and survive another day in the harsh world of reality. It was during this time that he decided to become an adventurer, slaying monsters to sustain himself. For a time, that was the only path forward for Aldred, who had risen from a commonplace orphan to a heralded dragon slayer in the eyes of the public. To Aldred, it was the absolute path, as he saw no other opportunity for an orphan like him. In his world, strength was the absolute law, and even though he suffered casualties along the way, they were merely an accepted consequence of the path he chose. Strength meant survival, and this belief led him to accept every loss without hesitation. Those experiences shaped him over time until he found himself as a rank adventurer, a dragon slayer, and one of the most powerful figures in the kingdom. As he looks at the crowd, frantically calling out to him as their dragon slayer, he brings himself back to the purpose of his journey that started so long ago to feed himself. Fame came, and so did glory, but now he stands wondering, where is his next adventure? Where will the next journey take him? Glory to Avalonia, chanted the crowd, lost in enthusiasm and excitement for the accomplishments of their hero. Yet, Aldred is no longer hungry. It isn't difficult to live anymore. He has passed his prime and doubts he can continue at the pace he once did. He considered staying in the kingdom, living in his mansion, and training the next generation of adventurers. However, he quickly denied that idea, realizing that it wasn't what he wanted. He no longer needed money, and the once thrilling capital now seemed dull. People approached him, but their conversations felt shallow, and the allure of the bustling city was gone. It was then that Aldred decided that disbanding the party he spent so much time with was the way forward. He told his party members about his decision, and although slightly surprised, they admitted they had reached the same conclusion. They acknowledged that disbanding didn't mean death. They could still see each other whenever they wanted. One member even mentioned his girlfriend's concerns, highlighting how they were all considerably older and approaching their 30s. Having come to a decision, Aldred asked his companions what they would do next. They looked at each other before Elliot spoke up, mentioning that his girlfriend's father, the captain of the Night Watch, had asked him to join the order. Another young man with black hair and a well-toned physique mentioned his plans to travel and enjoy the finer things in life, much to the dismay of the others. Meanwhile, the spellcaster announced her invitation to the Royal Magic Academy as a teacher, earning the awe and respect of her peers. Her smug face told them to keep praising her excellence, much to their annoyance. Aldred snapped out of his reverie and decided to share his plans as well. He confessed his desire to retire to a remote place called Nordend, which was met with confusion from everyone. None of his party members had ever heard of such a place. Seeing their puzzled faces, Aldred explained that Nordend was located far away, beyond the Paya Empire and further west into the Sphit Kingdom. Heel was astonished, mentioning that it would take an entire month by carriage to reach such a remote area. Aldred nodded, explaining that he wanted to find peace and tranquility in a place no one had heard of. His companions agreed, realizing that such a secluded place would be perfect for retirement, considering Aldred's fame and accomplishments. Curious, they asked why he chose Nordend. Aldred smiled nostalgically and admitted that he once saw a beautiful flower field there and had never been able to get it out of his mind. His companions were dumbfounded, realizing that the esteemed dragon slayer was just a man who admired flowers. Only the women understood his sentiments, looking at him with romanticized expressions. Aldred's mood soured, grumbling that there was nothing wrong with an old man liking flowers. Still dumbfounded, Heel theorized that perhaps monsters resided there, or maybe there was a mountain for Aldred to climb and train in solitude. Aldred dismissed the idea, bluntly stating that he had no use for more power and that he intended to live his life in earnest for himself. Respecting his decision, his companions supported him, mentioning that they understood. Aldred broke the somber mood by calling for a toast to the future and to the dreams they all held, earning a cheerful response from his companions. Their mugs clanked together, brimming with beer, as they celebrated one last time. The next day, Aldred left early in a carriage, keeping his retirement and the disbandment of the party private. He knew that if he had made a public announcement, he would have been stopped. The newly minted Dragon Slayer couldn't just retire the day after being crowned. The people needed a hero. Leaving the paperwork to his party members, he justified his selfishness by reasoning that after all he had done, he deserved it. A month later, Aldred sunbathed atop the carriage, calculating that he should arrive any time now. As his destination came into view, he stood up to admire the beautiful village surrounded by greenery and vibrant flower beds. Relief washed over him as he realized he had finally reached Nordend. Leaving his transportation behind, Aldred walked towards the village, only to be stopped by a young woman with a thick country accent who noted that his was an unfamiliar face. Caught off guard, Aldred introduced himself and explained his wish to move into the village, mentioning that he came all the way from the kingdom of Avalonia. The young woman, looking at him suspiciously, noted his rare black eyes. Realizing her rudeness, she finally introduced herself as Aisha and explained that if he wished to live in the village, he would need permission from the village chief, not her. Aisha then agreed to lead him to the village chief's house, albeit with an annoyed expression as Aldred marveled at the scenery with childlike joy. Upon arriving at the house, Aldred admired the flowers and remarked that they were just as beautiful as he remembered, earning a curious look from Aisha, who asked if he had visited the village before. Aldred admitted that it had been 9 years since his last visit, surprising Aisha. Embarrassed, she quickly composed herself, denying that anything was strange before calling out to the village chief. A woman named Fiona, appearing to be in her late 20s, came into view and assumed Aldred was Aisha's boyfriend, causing Aisha to vehemently deny it. Aisha clarified that Aldred was from Avalonia and wished to move into the village. Coming to an understanding, Fiona wears a calm smile and remarks that if Aldred really wants to move into the village, he should talk to her husband, mentioning that he is currently inside the house asking Aldred to follow her. Before leaving, Aisha asks Fiona to pass on a message to Flora when she gets home, detailing she will be at the Buo field. Aldred takes this opportunity to thank Aisha for her guidance so far. Following after Fiona, who knocks on her husband's door and calls out to him, remarking that they have a visitor from the kingdom of Avalonia that wishes to move into the village. A man on his mid to late 30s comes into view, opening the door to his study and meets Aldred, remarking that it is quite rare to get visitors to this village, and further adds that it's especially rare from a place as far as Avalonia. The man then introduces himself as Elgais, the village chief of the village of Nordend. Aldred introduces himself and states his wish to move into the village, which Ergis answers that it's quite a rare request, and asks if Aldred would mind if asked about his motives in doing so. Aldred confesses that he had been in the village of Nordend before and adds that since his last visit he hadn't forgotten the beautiful flower fields the village boasts. Ergis is pleased with the answer, mentioning that the flower field of the village is his pride and joy, and that no matter how long he stared at it, he wouldn't get tired of looking at it. He further states that the flower field being the sole reason for moving into the village isn't at all that rare, as others have done so before, but does add this is the first time it has been someone from such a faraway place such as Avalonia. Fiona cuts in mentioning that Aldred must have really been truly impressed by the flower field if he had made the trip from the kingdom of Avalonia to Nordend for the flower fields alone. Fiona then comes into the study and offers Aldred tea, which earns a remark from him, saying that the tea has quite the pleasant smell. Fiona adds that it's called apple tea, making Aldred curious and prompting him to take a sip, which surprised him and puts him on a good mood, adding that it's quite the relaxing tea. Fiona teases Aldred that now he's letting loose, mentioning that he looks so stiff and serious before. Aldred quickly apologizes for how he came across and clarifies that it was such a long trip and that traveling alone will do that to you. The village chief and his wife nod in understanding and agree with him that with those circumstances the result is understandable. Urgis tells Aldred to take it easy from now on, which startles him. And Aldred seeks to clearly clarify if what he said means what he thinks it means. And the village chief nods that he doesn't see a problem with Aldred moving into the village. The couple chuckle to themselves while Aldred celebrates with joy at his objective finally coming to fruition. He will now live in the village of Nordend. The village chief then tells Aldred that he can't get a place right away, but that he's welcome to stay with them while he looks for a place to move in the next day, which earns Aldred's utmost gratitude towards the chief and surrenders himself to their care, which promptly earns a reply from the couple. Aldred bows his head to him, which earns a small chuckle from Fiona, the chief's wife. Urgis asks if Aldred has any plans as they plan to eat lunch and wonders if Aldred would like to join. Aldred is taken back for a little bit and nods. However, before that he decided to visit the village flower field as he wants to take a good look at it. Aldred is now exploring the village and is fascinated, taking in all the splendors of nature and basking in the reality that he now lives here. He's finally done it after many hardships. Aldred is now one of the residents of the village Nordend. He gets a little emotional and tears up, surprising himself. He moves to wipe away his tears when he finds a petal on his hand as he moves to clean his eyes. And he recalls that the flowers in the field should change color with the seasons. However, he can't recall just who was it that told him that since it's been 9 whole years. Aldred decides to take a nap until he sees a girl he doesn't know. She is a girl surrounded by flowers. Just who is she? The girl is blushing at the sight of Aldred, but he decides to greet her properly. Good afternoon, he says, flustering the girl, as she doesn't know how to respond. Before enthusiastically pairing his greeting back at him, bowing at a 90 degrees angle altogether towards Aldred, then promptly taking off, running away from him. Aldred seriously wonders if his appearance is really that frightening to have a girl flee at the sight of him like the girl just did. Leaving that behind, he makes it back to the chief's house and is welcomed by Fiona, the chief's wife. And Aldred thinks to himself that it's quite a nice feeling to be welcomed by someone when you arrive home. Chief Urgis calls out to Aldred and asks how is the field he left to look at. Aldred remarks that the beauty and relaxing nature of the flowers made him nod off, which is why he is late, which he readily apologizes for. But the chief quickly dismisses it and says it's fine. Urgis then asks about the spot on which Aldred fell asleep and confirms if it was at the base of tree, which brings a smile to the chiefs, and nods in agreement, saying that it is a fantastic spot to fall asleep, before adding that rolling on the soft grass is the best, so much so that the villagers favor the place, and even he picks the same place to nap as well. Aldred, in full agreement, nods repeatedly with a knowing face of just what the village chief is talking about. Fiona even mentions that the spot under the tree is where she met her husband and looks at him teasingly, further adding that such a spot is also the same spot where Urgis, the village chief, proposed to her as well. Urgis is beet red like a tomato and chastises Fiona and asks her not to say such things in front of other people. Aldred joins in the teasing and remarks in admiration to the idea of confessing one's love under the spot, which is held dear by the couple, causing the village chief to further grow quiet at the embarrassment. Urgis tries changing the conversation by introducing his daughter, who to Aldred's surprise is the same girl he met at the flower field earlier, ignoring Aldred's surprise. The village chief introduces his daughter as Flora and tells her that starting today Aldred will be a new villager. Flora is a little lost and repeats Aldred's name before being interrupted by Aldred mentioning that she is the girl whom he met earlier. This piques the curiosity from the village chief and asks if they've met before. Aldred confirms that indeed he has met Flora under the tree they were discussing earlier, prompting Fiona to smile and tease at the significance of meeting under the tree, paralleling her meeting with Urgis, her now husband. Urgis keeps talking, letting his daughter know that Aldred will be staying the night at their home and asks her to look after him. Flora, lost and distraught, didn't hear her father and she comes to her senses at the second time she was called. She then agrees to look after Aldred and leaves, mentioning she will now be bringing the food. The village chief is apologetic at how absent-minded his daughter was, and tells Aldred that she just turned 18 years of age, and that she is a very shy girl. Aldred comes to the understanding that Flora is a shy young woman, and that would explain her earlier behavior, but it still hurts his feeling when she ran away at the sight of him earlier. The food comes to the table, and it turns out to be a feast which, the village chief remarks, it's a celebration in honor of a new family member joining the village. The chief very lovingly takes out a wine bottle that also reads Nordend as a celebration token from his behalf. Aldred is questioning the name of the bottle, to which the village chief clarifies it's made from Aisha's garden here in the village, and that is why it says Nordend. Aldred quickly recalls Aisha's very unfriendly face as the village chief explains the texture and drinkability of the wine, mentioning that it's so smooth even his daughter Flora can easily drink it. Intrigued, Aldred gives it a sip and quickly agreed to the description of a smooth and rather pleasant to the taste, and Ergis further adds that the wine is even better with the local cheese and tells him how to spread the cheese on bread, while Flora is enjoying her bread with cheese spread all over. Aldred is delighted at the combination of flavors, enthusiastically mentioning that bread and cheese is the best combination there is at the feast. Their feast continues to quickly disappear as it's consumed. Aldred compliments the beef stew, saying it's delicious enough to be sold at a store. This compliment doesn't escape Fiona ears and looks meaningfully at Flora, calling her out, commenting that with such praise the food was worth the effort. This causes Flora to blush at the teasing. Flora looks up, and while blushing cutely, she looks at Aldred and tells him her thanks for the praise. Aldred continues eating delighted until he notices Flora has finished her plate but doesn't know how to go about asking for more in front of a stranger. Aldred notices and asks if she wants seconds, to which Flora replies positively that she indeed does. Flora begins happily indulging once again in the food, and after thanking Aldred, making him feel like the distance they had when they met has now shrunk considerably. Aldred thinks to himself that on his next meeting with Flora she probably won't run away this time from him, and realizes that he'd also had 2 bowls of food as well. The next day, Aldred says his goodbyes to the village chief's family, to which the chief replies that there is no trouble and that they know that living alone is tough, so should he need anything he should just ask Ergis, then moves the conversation along and asks if Aldred has any specialties that he should know about, and if there is any idea about what job he wants to take over in the village. This question makes Aldred ponder and thinks about subjugation quests, but he shoots it down since the reason he quit being an adventurer is to live a peaceful life after all. Aldred responds to the chief, remarking that he is confident on his hunting ability and would like to do that and start his very own flower field. The village chief exclaims in admiration and becomes relieved since the village is indeed short of hunter at the moment, and he tells Aldred he will introduce him to someone knowledgeable of both hunting and gardening. Aldred once again says his thanks towards the village chief before being dismissed as a no problem, as to the village chief's eyes Aldred is now a villager and they must help each other out. As the village chief is ready to see Aldred leave, Flora comes out of the house and brings out a lunch sock she made for Aldred, to which he thanks her, which causes Flora to become a stuttering mess while she says that he should come another time to have dinner. Once again, such a sight warms Aldred's heart as he thinks to himself how cute Flora is. Leaving the house behind, Aldred walks alongside village chief Ergis, and the chief later asks if Aldred has any preferences when it comes to his home. To that question, Aldred gives it some thought, coming to the conclusion that he wants his home to be west of the village where the flower fields he's so fond of are. To that request, Ergis points to the near mountain where there is a lot of space for Aldred's future flower field. There are some houses in the west, so he tells Aldred to follow him close. The chief gives Aldred a tour of the entire area, showing him multiple houses before Aldred finally settling down on the one he finds perfect fit for him. Having that settled, Aldred asks the chief if there is anywhere that makes tools, to which the chief replies that there is and points him on the direction onto where to find what he is looking for. Then the chief points to a house inhabited by a man named Taku, who is the village's furniture maker. The chief asks for Aldred's patience since he'll need to talk to the man first. Before having talked to him, Aldred nods in agreement and repeats the name, adding it to his memory. The chief nods and tells him to talk to him the next day. The village chief gets up and gets ready to depart and leaves Aldred to his own devices, as he'll need to inspect the house and clean it. Aldred cleans the entire house spotless and finally looks at his handiwork with a satisfied look on his face and remarks that he will be visiting the man named Taku to talk tomorrow. But before all of that, he will take a nice, well-earned bath. He proceeds to the bathing area and fills a container like a bathtub with water produced from one of the magical tools he carries with himself, admiring how useful such tools are for everyday life. While using another tool that produces fire to heat up the water he had just poured to the bathtub, thinking of his companion spellcaster Kieran, who uses such magic without the aid of tools like his. Noting and realizing once more how incredible she is, Aldred walks himself into believing he'd be okay once he sees his work and the water before him is steaming out of the bathtub. Taking the plunge, Aldred submerges himself onto the bath and is rewarded with pure bliss as he feels all the tension and grime that had stuck to him on his travels is now melting away from him. Feeling refreshed, Aldred leaves the bath and wonders where is it that he has left his clothes. Meanwhile, walking around in his birthday suit, he thinks to himself that he might feel addicted to the sensation of being indoors this way. But to Aldred's surprise, Flora comes in running in a good mood, timing that he be just about finished with his work cleaning the house. She came in dashing to surprise him, but was welcomed by a stark naked Aldred walking around inside the house. This flusters Flora so much that tears well up in her eyes. Unable to contain her emotions, she bolts out of the house, leaving Aldred standing in stunned silence. As the door slams behind her, he is left alone with his spiraling thoughts. He reflects on his choices, realizing that all the progress he had made with Flora, the trust, the closeness he had worked so hard to build, has crumbled before him. It feels as if every step forward has been undone by 3 steps back. The bitter irony is that the damage seems irreversible, and the burden of figuring out how to repair what's been shattered weighs heavily on his shoulders. Worse still, she saw everything, leaving him to face the harsh reality of his actions. Aldred wakes up feeling unexpectedly refreshed on his floor bed. Out of habit, he murmurs a good morning before the reality sinks in. He is truly alone now, and this house is his own. After cleaning himself up, he decides his first order of business is to visit the furniture maker, a man named Taku. As he walks towards Taku's house, Aldred reflects on his current situation. Although his home is empty of furniture, waking up under his own roof brings a sense of freedom and independence that is undeniably priceless. Yet, his thoughts inevitably drift back to the incident with Flora the previous day. In a single moment, all the progress he had made with her was undone. He can't help but imagine that if she were to see him now, she would flee at the first glance of his face. He resolves to wait for things to cool down before attempting an apology, hoping that time will ease the tension between them. Lost in his thoughts, Aldred eventually finds himself standing in front of Taku's house. Noticing a nearby bench that looks quite comfortable, he decides to sit down and appreciate the craftsmanship. Just then, a voice calls out from a window, asking if he is Aldred, the man the village chief mentioned. A man emerges from the house, greeting him with a curious look. Aldred asks if he is Taku, to which the man nods, confirming his identity. Taku admits that he was quite surprised to see someone so fascinated by a chair. Realizing his own odd behavior, Aldred quickly apologizes, feeling a bit embarrassed. Taku, however, sees no harm in it and admits with a chuckle that he naturally has a stern face, so much so that smiling doesn't come easily to him. He confesses that his smile is so awkward that he avoids doing it altogether. Despite his serious demeanor, Taku's words carry a warmth that puts Aldred at ease, making the encounter feel unexpectedly comfortable. Taku welcomes Aldred into his home with a warm smile, mentioning that he's about to have breakfast. He generously offers Aldred some food, which Aldred eagerly accepts, admitting that he came straight over as soon as he woke up and hasn't eaten anything yet. This amuses Taku, who gestures for Aldred to sit down, promising to bring the food over shortly. As Aldred sits down, his excitement over breakfast gets the better of him, and his peculiar behavior resurfaces. He absent-mindedly strokes the dinner table, leaning his head against it and marveling at how smooth and sturdy it feels. Taku notices but simply chuckles to himself before heading to the kitchen. Moments later, Taku brings out a steaming bowl of vegetable soup accompanied by freshly baked bread. Aldred's eyes light up at the sight, and he enthusiastically comments on how delicious it looks. He eagerly takes a spoonful, and the taste exceeds his expectations, sending him into a state of culinary bliss. While Taku casually explains his cooking techniques, Aldred devours his food with unrestrained enthusiasm, hardly hearing a word. He eats so quickly it almost seems like he's inhaling the food, prompting Taku to ask curiously, "When was the last time you ate?" Aldred sheepishly admits, "Yesterday. I was too busy to eat." This surprises Taku, who advises him to slow down and enjoy the meal. Then, With a hint of concern, he asks, "Are you out of money? Is that why you haven't eaten?" Aldred quickly shakes his head, laughing off the assumption. No, no. I just forgot to buy food from the village chief. I was too eager to come here first thing in the morning. Taku sighs in relief but crosses his arms with a stern look. You should have prioritized getting food before coming here to ask about furniture. What good is a house full of furniture if you're starving? Aldred nods in agreement, realizing how impulsive he had been. You're right. I got too excited and didn't think things through. Taku's expression softens as he chuckles. Well, consider this breakfast a lesson and a favor. But next time, eat first before you go running around the village. Aldred grins sheepishly, grateful for both the food and the advice. He makes a mental note to be more practical in the future. Aldred mumbled that he couldn't go to the village chief's house today, which piqued Taku's curiosity. When pressed for an explanation, Aldred simply mentioned extenuating circumstances and refused to elaborate. But Taku wasn't about to let it go that easily. With a mischievous glint in his eye, he pointed out that since he was now providing Aldred with breakfast, the least he could do was explain himself. Furthermore, depending on the situation, Taku even offered to procure the food Aldred needed. Aldred's eyes widened in shock. Taku had backed him into a corner, and there was no way out. He couldn't help but think that Taku had the makings of a bully. Once he latched onto something intriguing, he wouldn't let go. Then, with a dramatic gasp, Taku ventured a wild guess. Wait, could it be? Are you dating the village chief's daughter? Aldred felt his heart skip a beat as he sat bolt upright. No, that's not it. It's just that. Flora saw me naked. The words tumbled out of his mouth before he could stop himself, and as the weight of his confession sank in, his face turned a deep shade of red. He had made a massive mistake. Taku's eyes widened before his mouth twisted into a wicked grin. Naked? He repeated, savoring the word before bursting into laughter. You were seen naked? By the chief's daughter? Taku was barely holding himself together, his whole body shaking as he tried to contain his laughter. But it was no use. He broke down, laughing uncontrollably. Aldred buried his face in his hands, pleading, Please, stop. But Taku was having the time of his life, repeating naked under his breath and chuckling every time he did. Aldred sighed, his embarrassment reaching new heights. Finally, he admitted, I can't go to the chief's house now. Not after that. It's just too humiliating. This revelation sobered Taku up, his laughter dying down as curiosity took over. You got close to Flora, huh? And then everything fell apart last night? His tone was surprisingly serious. That's interesting. You know. Flora is so shy she doesn't talk to any man. This grabbed Aldred's attention. Really? Not to any man? Not even to you? He asked, looking at Taku with newfound curiosity. Taku shook his head, crossing his arms. Nope. Barely a word when we see each other. Aldred smirked, leaning back with a playful grin. Maybe she doesn't talk to you because your face is just too scary. Taku's eyes widened in shock, clearly not expecting that answer. He sputtered, his confidence shaken before he puffed out his chest and declared, That's not it. And now, I've decided I'm definitely not helping you get food. Not for someone who insults me like that. Aldred scoffed. Oh, come on. You were laughing at my misery just a moment ago. Taku opened his mouth to retort but then stopped, realizing Aldred had a point. His lips curled into a reluctant smile. Fine, fine. You got me there. Clearing his throat, he leaned back against his chair and asked, All right, enough of the drama. Let's get to business. What kind of furniture are you looking for? Aldred was grateful for the change of topic, the tension easing as he shifted gears. Well, to start with, I need a bed. The floor isn't exactly the most comfortable place to sleep. Taku nodded, his demeanor turning professional. A bed, huh? I've got a few designs in mind. Let's see what we can come up with. And just like that, the embarrassing incident was put on hold, replaced by talk of wood, frames, and comfort, all of which Aldred desperately needed. Aldred replies that he will need all the basics, listing off a bed, a cupboard, a sofa, a table, and a few chairs, as he plans to live in the village from now on. He adds that he wants everything custom-made to fit his new home perfectly. Taku nods but warns him, if you want everything custom-made, you'll have to wait a while. Not only do I have other orders lined up, but custom work takes time. Aldred's shoulders slump, his excitement deflating. That's not ideal, he mutters, imagining more nights on the cold, hard floor. Seeing Aldred's dejection, Taku adds, Well, Beds are usually custom-made since they're crafted to fit each person's needs. But if you're that desperate, why not get a sofa first and use it as a temporary bed? Aldred's face brightens at the idea. That's a great idea. I'll do that. With that settled, Aldred looks around and asks, "Mind if I try out one of your chairs?" "Go ahead," Taku says, waving his hand. Without a second thought, Aldred picks the nearest chair. But before he can sit down, Taku yells, "Not that one. That's a work in progress." Aldred stumbles back, eyes wide. "I'd rather not injure myself. Thanks." Taku grins. "Don't worry. My other chairs are perfectly safe. That one's just not quite there yet." Aldred laughs off the mishap and tries another chair. To his delight, it's not only sturdy but also incredibly comfortable. "This one's great," he exclaims. Taku nods. "Makes sense. I built that one for someone about my height, and you're about the same height as me." Aldred's eyes light up. "I'll take one of these." Taku smiles. "I've got another one in storage. I'll bring it out for you." Aldred quickly responds, "I only need one." Taku raises an eyebrow. "Just one? What are you going to do when you have visitors?" "You should definitely invite the village chief over once you're settled." Aldred's face falls as he realizes his mistake. "You're right. I'm just so used to living alone that I didn't even think about visitors." He pauses before sheepishly adding, "All right, make that 2 chairs." With that decided, Aldred asks for Taku's help in moving the furniture to his house. Taku agrees but can't help grumbling. "Why am I the one helping people move their furniture?" He consoles himself by muttering, "Well, it's still better than being worked to the bone by the old ladies in the village." Despite his complaints, Taku helps carry the heavy pieces, and by the time they're done, he collapses on the sofa, exhausted. Aldred chuckles. "You would have needed to come over anyway to take measurements for the bed frame, so this just saves you an extra trip." Looking around his now-furnished home, Aldred feels a swell of pride and gratitude. "I'm glad to finally be a homeowner," he says, his voice tinged with emotion. "And since you're my first guest, how about some water?" Taku smirks, a teasing glint in his eye. "Your first guest? I could have sworn Flora was your first guest." Aldred's face turns beet red. You're still on about that?" Taking a sip of water. "I can't help it. You're too easy to tease." Aldred narrows his eyes, leaning back with a smug grin. "Maybe that's why the old ladies in the village work you so hard. I bet they're trying to bully the bully." Taku chokes on his water, sputtering as he wipes his mouth. What did you just say?" Aldred just grinned, enjoying his small victory. As the laughter dies down, Aldred looks around his house once more. It's amazing how a few pieces of furniture can make a place feel warmer, cozier, even. Taku nods in agreement. "Some decorations would help too, but yeah, the furniture makes a big difference." "Oh, and you should get a carpet to put under the bed. It'll protect the flooring and make the room look nicer." Aldred nods, mentally noting the advice. "You're right. I'll need to get some clothes and blankets too." Taku leans back, a satisfied smile on his face. "Seems like you've got your work cut out for you, but at least you're off to a good start." Aldred smiles, feeling a sense of accomplishment. His house was finally starting to feel like a home. Taku assures Aldred not to worry, as all the necessities he needs can be found in the village. He even offers to take Aldred around when needed, an offer that Aldred gladly accepts, looking forward to the tour. The next day, Aldred runs into Aisha, who is pleasantly surprised to hear that he has already found a place to live. "I live near the furniture maker, Taku," Aldred explains. Aisha's expression shifts to a mysterious look. "Oh, Taku, huh? I might just drop by sometime," she says, her tone playful yet cryptic. Aldred takes the opportunity to thank Aisha for showing him around when he first arrived. She brushes off the gratitude with a casual wave. "It was nothing. I just showed you around. It must be hard moving to a new place, that's all." Just then, Flora appears behind Aisha, seemingly looking for her. The moment Flora's eyes meet Aldred's, they both freeze, speechless. Flora's face flushes red, and she instinctively hides behind Aisha, peeking out shyly at Aldred. Aisha, however, isn't about to let this awkwardness linger. She nudges Flora forward, whispering, "Say hello." Flora musters up the courage and whispers a soft, "Hello," before the atmosphere plunges into an uncomfortable silence. The mood is heavy, the air tense, and Aisha's gaze turns sharp, almost demonic, as she glares at Aldred. It suddenly dawns on Aldred, Aisha knows about what happened the other day. Realizing this, he immediately bows at a perfect 90-degree angle. "I'm so sorry." He apologizes earnestly. To his surprise, Flora also bows, her voice trembling. I'm sorry for running away without saying anything. They both stand there, heads bowed, at a complete loss for what to do next. Aldred can't help but feel impressed. Flora didn't blame him. Instead, she acknowledged her own part in the misunderstanding. It dawns on him just how genuinely kind-hearted she is. The mood is suddenly shattered by Aisha, who claps her hands together. All right, I'm off to work. You two, walk home together, she declares, giving Flora a firm push toward Aldred before striding off with a mischievous grin on her face. Aldred and Flora are left standing side by side, dumbfounded by how abruptly the situation escalated. With no other choice, they begin walking in the same direction, an awkward silence settling between them. After several tense moments, Flora finally breaks the silence. In the same direction, an awkward silence settling between them. After several tense moments, Flora finally breaks the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. So, what are your plans for the rest of the day? Aldred's face lights up as he quickly replies. Now that I've settled into my new home, I plan to ask your father, Village Chief Urgis, to introduce me to the other hunters in the village today. Flora's eyes widen in surprise. You're planning to join the hunters? But you've only been in the village for 4 days. Isn't that rushing things a bit? Aldred shakes his head, his expression resolute. I've been taken care of by so many people here. It's only fair that I start giving back. I want to contribute to the village too. Flora's serious expression softens, and she lets out a small laugh. Well, with you hunting, I suppose the village will be feasting on plenty of meat. Aldred's eyes widen at the thought. I, I can't promise that, but I'll definitely do my best, he stammers, feeling a sudden pressure to live up to her words. Flora's eyes sparkle with encouragement. I believe in you. I know you'll do great, with a newfound determination. As they continue walking together, the tension from earlier begins to melt away, replaced by a growing sense of comfort between them. Aldred notices many village girls wearing fancy clothes, which piques his curiosity. He turns to Flora and asks, why do the villagers wear such beautiful clothing? Is there a special reason behind it? Flora nods, her eyes reflecting the appreciation she feels for her village. Yes, there is a reason. Our village is surrounded by beautiful flowers and breathtaking nature. If we wore shabby clothes, it would ruin the harmony of the landscape. Wearing nice clothes is our way of respecting the beauty around us. Aldred is genuinely impressed. That's a wonderful idea. The clothes really do complement the village's atmosphere perfectly. Hearing Aldred's compliment, Flora's face lights up with joy. Thank you. It makes me happy to hear you say that. They continue walking along the road when they come across Chief Urgis, who greets Aldred enthusiastically. Well, how are you settling in? Do you like it here so far? Aldred smiles and quickly replies, thanks to Taku's furniture, I've settled in quite comfortably. It's surprisingly cozy. The chief beams with satisfaction. I'm glad to hear that. But before he can continue, Aldred gets straight to the point. When will I be introduced to the village hunters? I want to start my work as soon as possible. Chief Urgis looks at him in surprise, echoing the same sentiment Flora had shared earlier. You just settled in a few days ago. There's no need to rush things. Take it slow. Hearing this, Flora can't help but giggle, realizing her father said the exact same thing she did. Aldred watches her laugh, a soft smile playing on his lips. Then, turning back to Chief Urgis, he insists, I understand your concern, but I've received so much help from the villagers. It's only right that I start contributing in return. Chief Urgis sees the determination in Aldred's eyes and nods. Very well. If you're that eager, I'll introduce you to the hunters. I noticed you walking with my daughter, so once you're ready, head over to the town square later today. Later that day, Aldred gears himself up for hunting, complete with arrows and a sturdy bow. He admires his reflection, feeling confident about his appearance. Satisfied, he heads to the town square as instructed, where he encounters a well-built man in his mid-40s fully geared up for hunting, accompanied by a young girl trailing close behind. The older man approaches and introduces himself. You must be Aldred. I'm Lawrence, the village hunter. Chief Urgis told me about you. Aldred's face lights up, eager to get started. Yes, I look forward to working with you. Lawrence chuckles and teases the young girl beside him. Well, unlike her, you seem to have good manners. The girl pouts, retorting, I do have good manners. Amused by their bickering, Aldred asks, Are you two father and daughter? Both Lawrence and the young girl shout, no, before turning away from each other in exaggerated annoyance. Lawrence then introduces her properly. This is Karina. She's my disciple, not my daughter. And no daughter of mine would lack charm the way she does. Karina pouts, sticking out her tongue. Well, I wouldn't want you as a father anyway. She then turns to Aldred, her demeanor shifting to one of pride. I'm Karina, and I'm 12 years old. Aldred is impressed by her confidence, but remains silent, which Karina notices. You're not surprised that someone as young as me wants to be a hunter? Aldred shakes his head. Why would I be? Hunting isn't about being a man or a woman. It's about skill and perseverance. I wouldn't be foolish enough to judge someone based on their gender. Karina's eyes light up, and she smiles proudly. Well, I'm very athletic. I want to be a hunter so I can help everyone in the village. Lawrence scoffs. Help? Huh? You're just a disciple, and you're at least 10 years too young to be a proper hunter. Karina puffs her cheeks in defiance. Then lower it to 3 years. Both Aldred and Lawrence are taken aback, giving her strained smiles. Lawrence shakes his head, turning to Aldred. Mind if she tags along? I need to test her knowledge as my disciple. Aldred shrugs, smiling. I don't mind at all. Lawrence grins in appreciation. Thanks. I owe you one. As they walk toward the mountains, Karina enthusiastically explains the area, mentioning how villagers frequently gather herbs and fruits. She also shares a secret. When I'm hungry, I look for nuts to eat. Oh, and when Master's in a bad mood, I give him a blue fruit to cheer him up. Lawrence's face flushes in embarrassment. Karina, don't go telling people unnecessary things. Ignoring his protests, Aldred asks about the local fruits. Lawrence seizes the opportunity to quiz his disciple. All right, Karina, name 5 fruits that grow around here. Karina proudly lists pico fruit, blue area, muria, kaku, and zuri. Lawrence smiles approvingly. Not bad. Turning to Aldred, he asks, do you know any of them? Aldred scratches his head. Just the kaku fruit. Lawrence nods. You should try the others. Here, this red spherical one is the pico fruit. It tastes like an apple, and you can eat it whole without peeling it. Aldred takes a bite, and his eyes widen. This is delicious. Lawrence grins. They're popular not only because they're tasty, but also because they're safe, no poisonous lookalikes. I got in trouble as a kid for staying out late eating these. As they continue walking, Karina finds a blue fruit and warns Aldred. The closer you get to the peel, the more bitter it gets, so avoid it. Lawrence laughs. That bitter taste is the best part. You'll understand when you're older. Karina rolls her eyes. Any adult who likes something so bitter must be crazy. Lawrence bursts into laughter while Aldred shakes his head, amused by their playful banter. Just then, they spot fresh deer tracks. Lawrence asks, want to try taking the shot? Aldred nods eagerly. Drawing his bow, he knocks an arrow and takes aim. In one fluid motion, he releases it, striking the deer with pinpoint accuracy. Lawrence's eyes widen in amazement. That was incredible. You're even better than my disciple here. Karina pouts. He's better than you too, master. Lawrence glares at her. You want to get expelled, you little brat? Karina grins cheekily. If you do, I'll just become Aldred's disciple. Lawrence's face turns red, and he puts Karina in a headlock, grumbling, brat. Later, as they haul the deer back to the village, they're met with admiration from the villagers. One of them asks Lawrence, did you bring down this beast? Lawrence shakes his head, pointing at Aldred. Nope, this one's all thanks to him. With his skill, we'll be eating meat for days. The villagers' eyes fill with respect as they gather around Aldred. Thank you. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask. Aldred's heart swells with gratitude. Thank you. I look forward to getting to know you all better. As the villagers process the meat and distribute it, Aldred reflects on his first successful hunt in the village. His new life was off to a promising start. Aldred thinks to himself as he considers these things. He notices that he has a visitor since there are knocking sounds coming from his front door. When he gets to the door, he is greeted by Flora, who, to Aldred's surprise, has come to check up on him. She sighs, relieved that he is fine and in tip-top shape. Embarrassed by the gesture, Aldred mentions that he worked very hard. He quickly changes the topic and gives Flora some meat as thanks for her kindness. As Aldred is getting ready to end the conversation, Flora stops him and asks him to join them for dinner again. To Aldred's surprise, he asks if it would be okay, to which Flora says yes. As Aldred makes his way to the village chief's house, he thinks back to Flora's prediction regarding his hunting prospects, and true to her word, they now enjoy plenty of meat. The next day, Aldred decides to visit the furniture maker. He promptly calls out to him, letting him know that he had brought some meat. Someone does open the door, and to his surprise, he is greeted by Aisha of all people, who greets him with a cheerful good morning. Confused, Aldred responds kindly and asks why Aisha was at his house. Aisha explains that she purchased a stool from Taku not too long ago, but it broke down, so she came to ask him to make another one. Aisha begins offering them some snacks in the shape of nuts, remarking that they were just lying around in Taku's house. She then jabs at him verbally, teasing him about the defective stool, which infuriates Taku. He comments that the stool broke because she used it as firewood, something he warned her about, predicting that it would indeed break. Aisha makes a sour face and mutters under her breath, which makes Aldred realize that she was at fault. Taku then tells Aisha that he won't give her any refunds, and if she wants another one, she'll have to look for the materials in the storage room. As Taku complains about Aisha's behavior, Aldred understands him a little. Changing the topic, Taku remembers that Aldred brought meat over and comments that he feels indebted to him. Taku is amazed by the freshness and bright red coloring of the meat. He then begins explaining the best way to cook it and mentions the need for salt. Aisha interrupts and suggests that the meat would pair well with wine. Taku then asks Aisha if she has picked a design for the new stool, which she confirms, and asks if it's at the same height as the previous one. Aisha then turns to Aldred and asks if he has a reward for her for guiding him previously. Aldred positively replies and inquires if he should bring it over to her, to which Aisha falls into thought. Aisha then suggests going to Aldred's house to eat the meat later. That day, at Aldred's house, he receives his guest and is surprised by the young woman standing on his porch. He doesn't recognize her, to which the woman hints that she isn't always wearing the same clothes, making Aldred realize that the very woman in front of him is Aisha herself, shocking him at how stark the difference is. Aisha gives Aldred the wine and baskets she had been carrying. However, Taku isn't letting this go, bursting into laughter at the fact that Aldred had no idea who she was and teasing her for probably roping her younger sister into wearing those strange clothes just for the dinner. This angers Aisha, who tells him to shut up with a grumpy face. At the gathering, Flora arrives, and Aisha seizes the opportunity to pull Taku's ear as punishment for his excessive teasing earlier. Aldred apologizes for abruptly calling Flora, but she dismisses his apology, saying that she has known Aisha for so long that she could guess it was her idea and that she has been like this for as long as she can remember. Taku then joins the chorus with Flora and repeats the phrase, "a long time," as if reminiscing, to which Aisha responds by elbowing him in the ribs, causing Taku to let out a scream of pain. Taku then straightens up and looks Flora in the eye with the best smile he can muster, but it backfires as he ends up frightening her with his awkward smile while introducing himself and describing his line of work. Aisha has to intervene on his behalf and tell Flora that Taku isn't a bad person. He just looks scary. Aldred adds that Taku is rather kind to women, which startles Taku since he has no idea what they are whispering about. This prompts Flora to chuckle to herself. Amusement fills the room as everyone wonders what is going on. Flora adds that their interaction is just so entertaining to watch, and the group shares a laugh at the playful banter. Flora then introduces herself, openly stating that she is the daughter of the village chief, to which everyone else warmly welcomes her, returning her greeting. Aldred then invites everyone into the house, and the group follows him inside. Once inside, Aldred asks out loud what they should do with the meat. A very enthusiastic Aisha shouts that she wants stew and steak. However, Taku isn't having it and is appalled by the suggestion, commenting that it would take too long. Aisha loses her enthusiasm, wondering if her suggestion wasn't any good, before Flora steps in and reassures her that she has everything covered. Flora explains that she has already marinated 2 pieces of meat, one with olive oil and salt and another with wine and herbs. Seeing the prepared meat gives Taku, the resident foodie, many ideas on how to cook the meal. Aldred adds that things will indeed be cooked differently. Coming to an agreement, Taku begins giving swift orders on how they will cook the meat, stating that Aldred will take care of the roast while Aisha will handle the steak. They readily agree. Taku then adds that too much meat isn't good, so he'll take over the vegetables and keep an eye on Aisha for good measure. This last-minute jab doesn't go over well, and Aisha soon protests. As the group begins with the preparations, Aldred asks Taku to teach him his recipe for making soup as good as his, noting that no matter how much he practices, he can't replicate the flavor he tasted the other day. Taku smirks knowingly and comments that it makes sense Aldred can't replicate the flavor since there are a couple of secrets he hasn't disclosed yet. Changing gears, Taku informs Aldred and Aisha that they only have 2 knives, so the two of them will have to share. Both Aldred and Aisha salute, showing their understanding of the captain of the kitchen. Aisha pauses for a moment, drawn in by the flavorful and appetizing smell of Aldred's roast. She comments that it smells pretty good. Taku, who is busy with a vegetable stir-fry, grumbles since he has to wait for Aldred and Aisha to finish using the knives. Frustrated, he snaps at Aisha to get back to work so he can finally use them. Ignoring the bickering happening nearby, Flora notices a change in Aldred and comments that he seems to be having fun. Aldred admits that he is, now that he's retired from adventuring and settled down in the village. This admission catches Aisha and Taku off guard, and they stop what they're doing, eagerly listening to Aldred's story. Flora is surprised and asks if he's fought monsters and demons before. Aldred confirms this, adding that he's also fought orcs, goblins, and even dragons. Aisha teases Aldred, saying that if they ever come under attack, they have nothing to worry about since Aldred is now one of the villagers of Nordend. Flora enthusiastically agrees, saying that if that time ever comes, they'd be depending on him. Aldred grins wryly, realizing they are teasing him. He shoots back, saying that it's been a while since he last fought monsters, so they shouldn't rely on him too much. As they continue cooking, the group chops, stirs, and peels ingredients, occasionally feeding each other for taste testing. At one point, Aisha feeds some of her roast to Aldred, causing him to blush slightly and admit that it's pretty good. Not everyone shares in the light-hearted atmosphere. Out of nowhere, Flora appears with a mischievous smile, asking where she should place the other ingredients while pointedly staring at Aldred. Flora keeps up the pressure, saying with a playful grin that Aldred has some sauce left over on his lips from the food Aisha just gave him. Aldred can only mumble his thanks, while a flustered Aisha calls him an idiot. Aldred is left completely baffled, not understanding why Aisha is suddenly being so mean to him. Later, the announcement that the food is ready echoes through the room, and the group heads to the table. They're greeted by a luxurious-looking banquet, even more impressive considering they cooked it themselves. The colorful accents of sauce and perfectly cooked meat decorate the plates beautifully. However, they soon notice that the abundant meat they started with is not fully represented on the dishes before them. The group quickly begins pointing fingers, blaming each other for eating the food while preparing it. Aldred comments that everyone was guilty of doing that. Flora puts up a feeble defense, claiming that she wasn't eating the food. She was taste testing to ensure it was presentable. Aisha shamelessly admits to eating it, prompting Flora to turn beet red and shout that she may have eaten a little too much the day before. To make up for it, Flora generously offers to share some of her portion with Aisha, leaving everyone else confused by their relationship. Moving on from the outburst, Aldred takes his seat at the head of the table and encourages his friends to eat to their heart's content as repayment for helping him out so much. He proclaims that he will entrust himself to their care from now on. As they begin eating, Aldred closes his eyes in delight, commenting that the sauté Flora prepared is simply exquisite. Flora shyly thanks him for the compliment and shoots back by praising the meat Aldred prepared, noting its fine texture and rich flavor. Aisha, not one for words, simply throws a thumbs up while chewing, her face full of satisfaction. Taku, the gourmet of the group, provides his critique, complimenting the meal and stating that the meat is tender and well seasoned. However, he's not as kind to Aisha's steak, remarking with deadpan eyes that it's too tough to chew. Aisha merely shrugs and states that she likes her steak with that kind of texture. Aldred chimes in, admitting that he enjoys it that way too. Flora then recommends pairing the strong wine with plenty of bread and vegetables. As they continue the feast, Flora praises the delicious soup. Aldred accepts the compliment before grumbling at Taku, complaining that no matter how hard he tries, he can't replicate Taku's soup. Taku rolls his eyes and calls Aldred an idiot, insisting that cooking is about adding your own twist and not copying someone else's recipe exactly. Seizing the opportunity, Flora offers Aldred a piece of fruit by hand, telling him to open wide. Aldred obeys without question. As he chews, he suddenly realizes that the flavor of the fruit is the secret ingredient he's been trying to figure out all along. He excitedly thanks Flora, who simply smiles warmly, happy to see his genuine joy. As the meal winds down, the group moves to the sofa, complimenting Flora's tea, praising its soothing flavor. They joke around, enjoying each other's company as the day comes to a pleasant end. Aisha sticks out her pinky, trying to appear refined, and asks, "Do I look like a princess?" To this, Taku snidely shoots back. There isn't a princess who drinks tea with her legs wide open. He adds that Aldred possesses more regality and appears more royal than Aisha. This catches Aldred completely by surprise, as he was suddenly dragged into a conversation he wasn't sure he belonged to. As they relax and finish their tea, the group suggests going fishing, an idea that excites everyone. They head to a nearby river known for its abundance of fish. As they make their way to the river, both Taku and Aldred note how pleasant the weather feels and joke about how challenging it will be to stay awake while fishing since the weather is perfect for a nap. While the two chat pleasantly, Aisha suddenly dashes toward the river, prompting Flora to chase after her. However, the chase doesn't last long as it turns out that Flora isn't much of a runner. Gasping for breath, Flora wonders how Aisha can run so fast and for so long. In response, Aisha scolds Flora, explaining that running regularly and maintaining stamina is essential since strong muscles won't fail when you need to run. Taku adds that since Aisha works at a large farm, she naturally has great stamina. He then teases her further by pointing out that Aisha's stamina might also come from constantly running away from her little sister, Tina. Aisha pouts at the jab but defends herself, explaining that running from her younger sister qualifies as a spur-of-the-moment situation where she definitely doesn't want her muscles to give out. Laughing at Aisha's reasoning, the group promptly takes off their footwear and approaches the river. The two men dip their heads into the water, sighing in relief at how refreshing it feels. Aldred notices something peculiar about Taku's hair and remarks that it becomes surprisingly straight when wet. Annoyed, Taku grumbles that his hair will go back to normal soon enough and tells Aldred to shut up. Aisha is far from staying quiet, though, as she bursts into laughter at Taku's appearance. Flora looks at them, confused by the hilarity, and tries to cheer Taku up by innocently commenting that his straight hair looks rather cute. However, instead of brightening his mood, Taku sulks even more. Flora, puzzled, wonders why her compliment had the opposite effect. Aisha, realizing Flora's obliviousness, teases her, saying, "You can't just shamelessly and mercilessly tease him like that." Taku, flustered and irritated, fills a container with cold river water and promptly dumps it over Aisha's head, shutting her up instantly. Aisha snaps, "Why did you do that?" Taku bluntly replies, "To shut you up." Aisha is not one to let things slide. Seeing that Taku is looking in another direction, she fills another container to the brim and dumps the freezing water down his back. Taku lets out a startled yelp, which sends Aisha into a fit of laughter. Aldred senses that things are about to escalate and tries to intervene, but his premonition is correct. The two have declared an all-out water war. They begin filling containers with cold river water and hurling them at each other mercilessly. Caught up in trying to stop Taku and Aisha, Aldred suddenly feels a splash of cold water. Turning around, he sees Flora grinning mischievously, a container of water in her hand. Realizing she has declared him her next target, Aldred gives in to her provocation and begins retaliating in earnest. Flora lets out high-pitched squeals as Aldred launches a barrage of water at her, both of them laughing through the chaos. However, in the midst of their water fight, Aldred suddenly stops, his face turning beet red as he stands frozen in place. Flora, not understanding why he stopped or why he's making such a weird expression, looks down at herself. Her face quickly turns crimson as she realizes that her dress has become completely see-through from the water, revealing every detail of her feminine figure to Aldred. Frozen in mortified shock, Flora finally lets out a loud shriek, her hands moving to cover herself as she trembles in embarrassment.